Welcome to the Change the Game podcast, where we are changing the game by doing business differently and highlighting stories of capitalism at its best. I'm Steve Baker, and with me today is Rich Armstrong, president of the Great Game of Business. Rich, how are you?
I'm good, Steve. How are you doing?
Well, I'd like to say some special words about how good I'm feeling, but I'm going to save them for our guest. We are so excited to have Howard Partridge with us today. Howard's an international business coach. He's got members of his coaching organization in over 100 industries in 20 countries. He's the best-selling author of 8 different books, a TEDx speaker, exclusive business coach for the Zig Ziglar Corporation, the first Ziglar legacy trainer in the world, the first founding member of the John Maxwell team, a master trainer for DISC certified human behavior, and he is also now a business made simple coach. What is this guy doing with his free time? That's what I want to know. Howard Partridge, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great being here. It makes me tired just thinking about all that stuff. Did I actually do all that?
You do. And that's one of the reasons we have you on here. It's a really impressive list of not only accomplishments, but also you're very well celebrated, and people love you. Some may think that you were, born with a silver spoon in your mouth, but that wasn't the case. Could you take us in the Wayback Machine and talk about what your childhood was like all the way up to starting your first business?
You bet. So I tell people that I'm originally from LA, Lower Alabama. And then I tell them it's okay. My wife doesn't laugh at my jokes either. So, that's all right. But I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. There were 7 kids crammed in a little 600 square foot shack. And the roof on that house was so bad that every time it rained, we had to get out all the pots and pans to catch the leaks. My mother fed us on $100 a month from the welfare department. And so when you grow up in an environment like that, you're kind of wild. And I was a wild teenager, and I got in a fight with my stepdad and got kicked out of the house at almost 18 years old. And I climbed on a Greyhound bus, scraped up $39.95 for a Greyhound bus ticket to Houston, Texas, to live with my real dad that had left when I was a year old. I'd only met him twice in my whole life. And I arrived in Houston, Texas on that Greyhound bus with literally 25 cents in my pocket. I became a waiter, and I worked in all these really nice restaurants, wore a tuxedo to work, and did this tableside cooking, steak Diane, bananas Foster, cherries Jubilee, and setting stuff on fire inside was pretty cool, let me tell you, at that age. And but I always wanted to have my own business. I did a lot of stuff to make money when I was a kid, cut grass and all that. And but I just really didn't have any money to speak of. And then I met my wife, Denise Conjette Antoinette Pinella. Now that's Italian. She's from New Jersey. I'm from Lower Alabama. This is going to be a good match. And when you marry into an Italian family, you don't get wedding presents, you get cash. And we got $3,000 cash and wedding money from all the relatives and little envelopes. And there was a friend of the family, same age as me, 23 at the time. And he was tooling around a little red Mercedes convertible. And that got my attention. I said, I want to know what that guy does. I want to know if it's legal. He was a business owner. He had his own business. So I got back to Houston, spent that $3,000, all the money that we had to our name, starting my first business out of the trunk of my car. And I struggled for the first 13 years. I worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, I made good money, but I was just literally I just worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And then in 1997, I started learning about systems and organizing my business. And I started implementing those systems and transformed that same business into a predictable, profitable turnkey operation. And 24 years ago, I started sharing those systems with other business owners. Wow. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
Hey, yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about Steve just mentioned earlier that you've written 8 books. I was going to ask you, how did you come up with that much content? But based on that story, you had plenty of content to share, right?
I think I could I experience enough these days, pretty much every day or at least every week, to write a new book. I just actually wrote 2 more books this past year. And I don't think I'll ever run out of content. So I have 10 books right now. The other two will be published. One of them will be published this year, and the other one probably next year by the time we get it out there.
That's amazing. I'm always in awe of people that can do that, that have the talent to do that. Because Steve and I, and the book that we wrote was the first one I ever wrote, and it was a struggle. And
it was like childbirth, Howard.
It is. It is. It is.
So
yes, listen, I understand, and so I fortunately for me, I like to write and I love to share, and so
yeah.
I'm always sitting on that beach. I write it in a notebook and a notes app before I ever put it in a computer, so that's helpful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, can you give our listeners a little insight to what these books are about? What do you write about?
Right. So the first one that I wrote was 7 Secrets of a Phenomenal Life, just about personal development. The second one is 5 Secrets of a Phenomenal Business. Most of my books are about small business growth and scaling a small business. I wrote a leadership book called The Power of Community, how phenomenal leaders inspire their teams while their customers and make bigger profits. And then I have other spiritual books, and the last 2 books I wrote this year, one of them is a devotional and the other one is a book for young people. It's for youth. So there's a pretty big range there. In our community of business owners, we're impacting the entire family. And so a lot of times on our group calls on Zoom like this, the kids will be sitting there listening, or the employees will be sitting there listening. And so they're all engaged. And like last week at our retreat, we had about 115 people local, and I want to say about 40 online. And about half of those people that were there were kids.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah. And so I just have a burden to help kids understand what success really is. And so we've been doing a lot of youth training.
I think that's great, because that's what we need to know is how are we engaging the next generations and making the world a better place, which fits right into our mission of transforming 10 million lives. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Howard, what is there something you could point to that you would call a catalyst for transforming your business into what it is today?
Absolutely. I learned several lessons along the way. The first one was that the one and only reason your business exists, or your career really for that matter, is to help you achieve your life goals. And everybody has different life goals. So therefore everybody needs a different kind of a business or a position. Then I learned the value of systems, of duplicating processes so that you could easily train someone to do it. Then I had to learn the value of profitability and what you guys learn or teach. And I had to learn that. And Ellen Rohr, who has been a big fan of you guys for so many years, helped me figure that piece of it out. And I had to figure out the leadership piece. And so there had been several periods, I guess you would say, along the way. The first one was just realizing why I was in business. The second is, if I'm going to get this business beyond myself, I got to have systems if we're going to have any order. And then you got to make money. And then what about leadership? What about people? What about building that phenomenal dream team?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Howard, I know that you have a long history with Zig Ziglar. I think Steve mentioned that earlier as well. I've always been a fan of Zig Ziglar, and I think we've had some side conversations about that connection. But could you share with the audience how you first got involved with that organization?
You bet. So I had met Zig briefly at a big conference, and about 5 years later, I just called on the Ziglar organization to see how I could get involved, because I just wanted to meet him. I thought, well, if I could get an interview with him for my audience, for these business owners, how cool would that be? I mean, I was just hoping for maybe an interview over the telephone or something, and ended up having him come and speak at our conference. And Tom and I got to know each other and started building a relationship. They decided to go into small business training and asked me if I would facilitate their small business training. So all the small business owners that follow Ziglar, we invite them into our coaching program. And as the relationship developed, I began to help them with their business. And today I help Tom basically run that company as a management consultant.
And for what it's worth, I just finished Choose to Win last week, Tom Ziglar's new book. And it's about 50% Howard is what I'm saying. He really gives you a lot of credit. And that's something special.
It really is. I mean, I never could have imagined in my whole life. He just wrote a new book that'll be out in December, I think, about all the disruption and some of the things that are coming and how to handle that. So we're best friends. We're like brothers.
That's amazing. So that relationship is deep with the Ziglar family. And how would you say that relationship has changed your mindset and your business?
Well, I really have bought into the whole Ziglar philosophy, and I live by it. I teach it every single day. I mean, I can't write a book. You talk about all these 10 books, all of them except for the devotional, because that's all biblical. You won't find a book that doesn't have Zig Ziglar all over it. And so his philosophy just really changed my life. And he was a man who not only is probably the most quoted motivational speaker on earth, he was the same man, maybe even a better man, if you could say that, backstage as he was on stage. And, he ended his life or he finished his life, I should say, at 86 years old without a blemish on his reputation. That's quite an accomplishment for somebody that's that famous. And so I live by the philosophy. I believe in the philosophy. And in fact, when I'm with you guys in September, one of the Ziglar programs is what I'm going to be sharing.
Excellent.
Oh, that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about that, Howard.
Yeah.
What will you be sharing?
So Zig Ziglar's favorite quote till the day he passed away is, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what it is that they want. And I'm going to share 4 principles of relationship building from the Ziglar philosophy with the folks so that they can get along better with everybody, not just people at work, but at home and in the community. And so my philosophy is that all of business and all of life is about relationships. And if we can turn the culture that we have today, the me generation, to understand, and this is really what my youth book is all about, is that you can't get there from here. You can't expect to have the kind of life that you want if you're selfish, if you don't give, if you don't consider other people, if you don't build winning relationships. That's the name of the course, Building Winning Relationships. And so there's certain things that you have to do if you want to have that outcome. And I feel like all of business and all of life is about relationships, and building winning relationships is the most important skill you can have. And it is a skill. Of course, in order to develop that skill, you need to want to do it. You need to have the desire to do it. And you need to value other people. I mean, if I don't value other people, I'm not going to work hard at developing that skill. I'll develop maybe the skill of manipulating people. But first, you got to ask yourself the question of, how do you value other human beings? How do you value yourself? And so those are some of the things that we'll be talking about.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love how you're saying that's the critical skill, if I could paraphrase that, building winning relationships. That really does tie into our building a culture of winning, a culture of ownership, a culture of responsibility and freedom. How do you see what you do tying in with the great game of business?
Yeah, everything, because the fact is that if we're going solo, we're not sharing what's happening. We're not sharing the numbers. We're not leading with why. We're not communicating. We're not engaging people. As we all know, 70% of American workers are disengaged and 18% are actively disengaged. But when you understand that getting the team in on the game, and that we are a team, not just a boss or a leader or a supervisor and then them, everything changes because they'll help you. Again, it goes right back to that quote. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what it is that they want. Mm-hmm. So the focus has to be outward, and leadership or understanding the numbers, because we all, we win together, we lose together.
Yeah. It's like Jack Stack's business hire law number 2, I think it is. Pretty easy to stop one guy, hard to stop 100.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Momentum. That's right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Howard, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but what's next for Howard? What's next for your organization?
So we are just getting our community as solid as we can, just always, tweaking the systems and the community. And I think that's the thing that's different about us, that if there's one thing that people say that are in our membership, the thing that's different is community. There's this strong sense of, caring for one another and helping one another and being there for one another, and just going deeper with that. I'm taking my leadership group to higher levels. I've got to always be ahead of the game a little bit, and I'm always learning from them and just bringing new things to them. So tweaking the structure, but also trying to take them to a higher level.
When you have your conference in October, we're going to be appearing there with you. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what people can expect from those 3 days?
Sure, you bet. So if you're not a member with us yet, you'll start with a full day boot camp, and that is to learn the proven business systems, which is leadership, marketing, sales, service, and administration. Leadership, everything you do to communicate your vision; marketing, everything you do to attract prospects; sales, everything you do to convert those prospects into paying customers; operations, everything you do to serve your clients, your patients, your guests, your members; and administration, everything that you do to track the stats. And so that's day 1. Day 2 and 3, they're going to get to hear from a young man that I know by the name of Steve Baker, and he's going to be sharing with them, discover the great game of business and get in the game, the 10 steps of implementing the great game of business. And I think it's going to be phenomenal.
I got to tell you, I'm strangely interested in this content.
Yeah. And we'll have a few other great speakers also. I always do a couple of sessions myself at my conferences. I usually open and I'll usually have something special for the group. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet myself, but we have a guy who is a coach. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the movie Friday Night Lights, mm-hmm. and the TV show. Well, there was a coach there at the book and in the movie, but he was literally really the one who is mentoring those kids at Permian High School. And he wrote a book called Behind the Friday Night Lights, the behind the scenes story or something like that. His name is Coach Nathaniel Hearn. And this man at our Ziglar conference delivered the most inspiring keynote. This man delivered the most inspiring keynote I think I've ever heard.
Wow.
Now that's a big statement.
Yeah,
that is, because you've heard the big ones.
I have heard his story, and I don't want to spoil it for the audience. His story and the way he told it was just like, 1 minute you're crying and the next minute you're laughing, and he's a coach. If we're going to play the game, we need a coach. If we're going to lead people in the game, we have to coach. And so that's why I brought him in for this particular one. And then there's another speaker we have. His name is Alan O'Neill. He started a plumbing company with another guy with one truck. And he and I networked here in Houston together. And he went on to sell that company and became the CEO of the combined company that with the joint venture, sold the thing twice, I think it was, and just made stupid money. And at last count, they were doing 115 million in their latest venture. So he'll be speaking also. And I just want business owners to get a bigger vision. You know, you get to decide. That business is a vehicle to help you achieve your life goals, and you get to choose. If you want to sit on the beach, write books, you can do that. If you want to grow a big business, a couple $100 million, you can do that. It's you get to choose, but most people don't believe that they can do those things. And so we just want to try to raise the leadership lid a little bit.
Kind of help people get through those limiting beliefs and punch through a couple of ceilings and get to where their potential really is. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Howard, I wanted to point out to folks that they can learn more about you at howardpartridge.com, but I also wanted to share some other things. I got a chance to read one of your books that you recommended, How to Live Your Phenomenal Dream Life. I got to read it on the beach. So I'm reading about you writing the book on the beach while I'm reading it on the beach. It was very circular. I mean, it's just your wisdom is very approachable. You've been informed by some of the best minds out there. In fact, guys, if you're listening, Howard's even featured in a documentary about Zig Ziglar called Zig, You Were Born to Win. And that's on Amazon Prime. I think I'd highly recommend it. You also get to see his house in Destin, which is his phenomenal dream house. So, and the 8 books that you've written, it's just so great. I'm very much looking forward to being a part of your conference, but also you'll be at our conference September 8th through 10th. So you can see Howard Partridge there as well. Yes. So thank you very much for being a friend of the game.
Thank you guys. It's just it's a pleasure. I'm very grateful to be involved. I really believe in what you're doing and excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, that speaking of your involvement with the game, I when we first met, again was through Ellen Rohr, and she was very excited to get us introduced, and primarily because our business is typically with the game. We've traditionally worked with larger organizations, mid-sized, larger organizations, and you have primarily worked with smaller organizations. Mm-hmm. As you've learned more about the game, how have you seen to adapt the game to smaller organizations? Is there any differences at all that you've recognized at all, or how to make it more approachable for smaller businesses?
I think it's already approachable. I mean, reading through for example, Get in the Game, the book that you guys wrote, and just going through those 10 steps, learning those 10 steps are very valuable. The only difference really in my mind is that with small business owners, you're typically going straight to the owner and you don't have to work through big teams. And so it's a little faster and more agile. They don't have big budgets and things like that, but that's okay. They don't think about some of the things that are in the great game of business. And so it's totally not only approachable, it's needed, very much needed. And that's why I'm excited to bring it to the small business community.
That's great. That's great. Well, hey, to kind of wrap up our podcast, we always ask a question, is what question we should be asking you, Howard? What are we missing?
I would say that the question you should ask me is, through all of these phenomenal experiences, I mean, literally just sometimes, when I do take a moment to sit back and think about this, I'm just kind of blown away that I get to do what I do. And I'm grateful to be a part. I would say, what's the biggest life lesson that you've ever learned?
Well, what is that life lesson? I'd love to hear that.
The biggest life lesson in my mind that crosses business, life, every part of business is this: get around people who are already where you want to be. They've done what you want to do. They've mastered it. They've perfected it. And that have a system to help you learn it. Ellen Rohr is a great example of that. I had a great business, great culture, just phenomenal service. We're doing a few $1 million a year, but we're struggling with the finances and where's all the money going and how do we manage all this? And she flew in like Wonder Woman and got us all fixed up and left us with a very simple system. And with that system, I got my debt paid off and became debt free personally. So if you want to be more successful financially, then hang around people who are not only more successful financially, but that also have a process. Because some people might be successful, but they're not sure how it happened. It just happened. You know, it's probably, you can probably find the clues, you can probably find the process, but they just didn't recognize it as it happened. They just took the next step, which is fine. But when you find someone who's already done it and they have the passion to help people and they have a process, now you've got a winner. And so I live by the philosophy. Gary Keller, who wrote the book, The One Thing, and built Keller Williams Realty into the largest residential real estate company in the country, probably in the world, says, don't do the best that you can do. Whatever you do, do it the best that it can be done. So in order to do that, you got to find the person who has the best wheel, who has the best process, and learn from them. Doesn't matter what it costs, because you're going to get a return on that investment. And that's just what I've done. I've just tried to find the best people to learn from.
That's great advice. Thank you, Howard.
You bet.
Yeah. Love the conversation and sure love hanging out with you. We feel like we get smarter every time we spend some time with the HP man. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Howard. You're a special guy, and I feel phenomenal right now.
Yay!
Well, again, folks, howardpartridge.com, and you can always check out the notes at the bottom of the screen as well. Well, let's keep the conversation going. Send us your questions, your stories, your best practices, your ideas, your challenges, and of course, your victories, because that is capitalism at its best. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.